Good morning, this is Ann Burkholder and I'm alongside Brandon Sorensen, and we're coming at you live from Roberts Cattle Company in Lexington, Nebraska. We're glad that you joined us this morning. We've got a foggy day here in central Nebraska, so visibility is not that great, but the good news is the cattle are really comfortable because it's a nice cool 60-something degree morning, which is a gift and a blessing in the month of August. So this morning we're going to talk about a topic that I think is really important for all of us to think about, not just cattle caregivers like Brandon and I, but also you, our customers that are out there purchasing our beef in the grocery store. So we're going to talk about cattle transportation because the way that the cattle industry works in Nebraska, our animals are going to move from one place to another for a couple different times over their lifetime. So let's talk a minute, Brandon, about the cattle life cycle. The fact that most of our animals are going to eat grass for the majority of their lifetime. So it doesn't matter if it's grass-fed or grain-fed. Studies have shown that more than 90% of what cattle eat over their lifetime is grass, and so cattle start on a ranch where there's lots of grass. They hang out with their moms, they eat grass, and they grow for the first 8 to 12 months. And then at that point in time, lots of times the home ranch will run out of feed resources. There won't be enough grass for the animals to be able to eat, and so it's time to take the offspring, the animals that won't be used for breeding, and move them to the next facility. And they may go to another farm, they may go to another grass operation, they may come to a feed yard like this one. And so I think it's important for us to think about how we manage our resources and what role that plays in transportation. So Brandon, can you take a couple of minutes to talk about what we grow in Nebraska and then how we feed it to our animals?
Yeah, so here in Nebraska we grow a lot of corn, grow a lot of alfalfa. With the corn we go to ethanol plants, so we also have wet distillers grains as a byproduct that we're able to feed to the cattle. Like I said, we have a lot of alfalfa here through the valley, so although that makes a really good product to feed to the cattle, like Ann said, sometimes that's not the closest. The corn might be away from the cattle, so a lot of times if cattle are grown in the sandhills, once they're done on their life cycle up there as a calf or a yearling, we got to ship them closer down to where the feed is and the feed yards, and generally a lot of the feed yards are pretty close to around crops, so we're able to be a little bit more efficient and feed them grain that we grow.
Yep, and you know the last part of the life cycle is one that sometimes we don't like to talk about, but I think that it's part of the calf life cycle, and that's the point where the animals give of themselves to make food for us to be able to eat and to feed to our families. And so obviously it's important to have the cattle near a packing plant, and so one of the things that we try to do as an industry to minimize stress is to make sure that at that last stop in life we're not moving our animals as far. Because that helps them to maintain comfort kind of all the way through the end of the life cycle. And so often, many times, the cattle will move to a feed yard or to a grass operation that's closer to a packing plant to make that last trip a little bit easier. So that's why we transport cattle. We transport cattle in order to have them near the feed resources that they can convert to human food. And then ultimately we have them close by to the packing plant where they actually do become food. So let's talk a little bit about why it's important that we do it well when we transport cattle, and how we make sure that we do it well. And you know, Brandon, when I think about all the different hats that we wear, right, where I'm a mom, you're a dad, we're both cattle caregivers, you work with youth in your church, I work with youth as an athletic coach. One of the things that I think that I've found out over the last 20 years is that I can't completely eliminate stress from the earth.
Yes.
I'd love to. It'd be awesome. But stress is there, and so it's my job to teach our animals and the kids that I mentor and my own family as well how to manage that stress. And we very much do that with our cattle too. It isn't just something that we do with the kids that we work with. And so it's important to teach them how to manage stress. And so you work with cattle quite a bit in terms of acclimating and getting them used to animal caregivers. And also we do some things at the feed yard when we receive cattle in to make sure that it doesn't take them very long to get used to their new home. So can you talk a little bit about what it is that's important to cattle? If you were to ask a calf what was important to him, what would he tell you?
Well, really, it's pretty much the same things what's important to a human. Clean water, fresh feed, clean place to live or, lay down. Sometimes we like that to be dry places, but here this year that's been kind of hard with all the rain. And then also interaction with the herd mates. Beef or bovine are definitely herd mates. They like to be a part of a group. If you get one off by themselves, it's most generally wanting to try to get back. So just trying to be a part of a whole group is very important to that animal and just lowers the stress in them.
No, I think that's great. The only other thing that I would add is cattle are creatures of habit.
Yep.
And so as caregivers, one of the biggest things that we can give them is to be consistent. So we make sure that we feed cattle the same way every day. We make sure that we clean water tanks the same to make sure that they are comfortable in their surroundings. And we make sure that when we handle them as cattle caregivers and cattle handlers, that we handle them the same way so that they know what to expect. And I think that helps them to acclimate as well. And so, so let's think about transporting. So obviously cattle are going to spend time on a truck, right? So what can we do to try to minimize the stress? So we know that feed and water is important to them, so we try to minimize the time that they spend on the truck, making sure that they have good access to fresh feed and water up until the moment they get on the truck, and then that they have access to those things as soon as they get to their destination as well. So we minimize that time when they don't have access to feed and water. We also set them up for success and put them on a nice truck or a nice stock trailer. My family just went on vacation a couple of weeks ago. We drove 3,300 miles visiting family and visiting some colleges, and we rented a big van because my husband's extended cab pickup probably wasn't going to fit all 6 of us. So we do the same thing with our animals. We make sure that we put them on an appropriate vehicle to be able to get them there. We make sure we have good communication with the truck driver. We very much view ourselves as a team between the cattle rancher and the feed yard and the truck driver and then ultimately the packing plant. And so we try to find ways to work together, again, to minimize that stress, make sure we're keeping our cattle on feed and water, make sure that they're acclimating in. Can you talk a little bit about how you get cattle used to a new setting after we've moved them?
Yep, so when we get them here into the feed yard, what we do is an acclimation process. Most generally, we like to bed the pens down. We also give them fresh water, fresh hay. We'll clean the tanks right when the cattle get there. Just to invite them, fresh hay in the bunk, fresh feed in the bunk, and a good, clean, dry pen. We also spend some time with those animals for the first maybe 7 to 10 days, acclimating them to the pen, moving them around to the pen, kind of showing them maybe where the feed bunk is if they're fresh calves, where the water tank is if they're fresh calves. Some older cattle that we get in yearlings might be already bunk trained or, kind of have an idea. But just spending that little extra time, getting trust built with the pen riders and the caregivers that we have, it goes a long way for further down the process when we're handling them, whether we be, maybe re-implanting them, reprocessing them, or shipping cattle at the end. Just kind of helps maybe lower their stress and gain some trust in us as caregivers.
Absolutely. I think that the cattle need to have consistency. They need to be cared for by people with lots of patience, right? And so we try to make sure that we are good leaders for them. Because clearly we are not only their caretakers, but we're also their leaders. So that's an important component. One thing that I want to talk about here a little bit as we answer the question, how do we do it well? The first answer is we do it well by understanding our animals, understanding their needs, and then making sure that we provide that. There are some tools that we use to help to make sure that we're doing our job well. One of them is the Cattle Transportation Quality Assurance Program that's been created by our National Cattlemen's Beef Association. We use BQA educational training tools on site on our farms and in our feed yards to make sure that our people understand what they need to know about taking care of cattle and to make sure that we're working with our veterinarians to offer that care every single day. And then the other thing that I think that we do really well that I'm very proud of is our progressive beef quality management system that we have in all of our feed yards. And really what that does is it takes BQA to a whole new level. We focus on 2 things. We care enough to do it right, and then we're willing to audit ourselves to make sure that we're doing it right. And certainly caring enough to do it right is critically important. But being willing to take that step to audit yourselves and to allow a third-party auditor to come in and assess you, I think that takes that level of commitment to an even higher stake. And so this year we're rolling out a new transportation component to the Progressive Beef program. It's going to be rolled in phases, and phase 1 came into effect here in 2018, where the feed yard managers are assessing their crews and their truck drivers as we ship cattle. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are looking for and what you think that you're gaining from the transportation component of Progressive Beef?
Yeah, so the transportation component for Progressive Beef is in the app. We have a log, if you will, that we're supposed to fill out once a month as we ship cattle. The manager or someone on site is supposed to observe loading cattle, and that goes from the scales to on the truck. What they're looking for is maybe how long they spend how long they spend in the catch corrals, if there's any slippage, maybe where the truck driver is holding their hot shot, whether how many truck drivers are around. And we like to try and just convey the message to the truck drivers that we're using that it's not just a ram and jam and get them on the truck and go. We've taken care of these cattle for sometimes maybe up to 200 days, the best we can, and we feel like it's our duty to try and get these cattle on the truck in a very calm and safe manner, so that way the ride to the packing house is as comfortable as can be, and maybe prevent the loss of dark cutters and just lower stress. And we try and convey that to the trucker, that really everything that we do on here, as soon as they get on their truck or we're loading them, it's out of our hands and on their hands, and we try and make sure that the truckers are aware that they're a very important part in the process, and not just the last stop, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a couple of really important things. So, we offer really good care to our animals throughout their lifetime, and their lifetime doesn't end when they leave the feed yard. And so it's critically important that we maintain our good animal welfare standards all the way into the packing plant at the end of life. And that kind of leads me to our last point, which is, why is it so important that we do it well? Why is it important that we minimize stress? Why is it important that we honor our cattle by offering them good care? And I think the answer to that question is our cattle give the ultimate sacrifice when they go to the packing plant. We have given them our care and our resources over their lifetime. But then when they take the step and go to the packing plant, they're giving us the ultimate sacrifice by creating the beef that I'm feeding to my family, and I know that you're feeding to your family as well. And so as we honor that sacrifice, one of the ways that we can honor that sacrifice is working together as a good team between our feed yards and between our packing plants and between our truck drivers, just making sure that we're maintaining that high level of care all the way through the process. So I think that's really a great place for us to stop this morning. If you guys have any questions about transportation relative to cattle, or specifically how we do things at Roberts Cattle Company or at Innovative Livestock Services in any of our feed yards, or if you have questions about the Progressive Beef program, we've just kind of glossed over a really important program, a really comprehensive program that helps us to offer the best animal welfare to the animals that God places in our possession, and we really truly feel like it's our duty to do the best that we can to offer that welfare to our animals all throughout their lifetime. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time to visit with us this morning. Hopefully we've answered some questions that you might have had about transportation. Why do we transport our animals? How do we do it? How do we make sure that we do it well? But if you do have any lingering questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate you sharing your time and hope that you gained something from it. God bless you and have a great day. Thank you, Brandon, for joining us. All right, take care.